We'll be recording today's session, so you'll be able to review it or share it after we're done. So good morning. I'm Susan Williams, the President of Venango Area Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to the 6th in our Shift, Sustain, Succeed series. We welcome everyone to join us every Tuesday and Thursday as we do our best to find you answers to the most pressing questions our businesses have in navigating the COVID-19 situation. We've talked about funding, human resources, concerns, and returning to work responsibly. And today we're going to talk about how to stay connected, even when we're physically distanced. Our guests today are Alan McBride, Global Talent Manager for Komatsu Mining, and Saxon Daugherty, Communications Specialist for Child Development Centers. Alan and Saxon work for two of our region's largest employers, both with multiple locations and diverse teams. Additionally, both Alan and Saxon are active volunteers and routinely are connecting with community groups before the pandemic and through it. I'll remind everyone that the rules keep changing and some of them have not even been written. So Alan and Saxon will be helping us based on the information we have available today in our current situation. If you have additional questions or you wish to comment, please feel free to submit them in the Zoom chat and we'll do our best to include them at the end of our call or to follow up. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So Alan, Komatsu is a big company and I assume has really good resources. How has COVID-19 changed the way that your employers are working and meeting?
Thanks, Susan. I think in terms of Komatsu, we've seen a huge shift in our working culture, our working environments, going from the operations manufacturing settings and also some of our office locations into the work from home mentality. We've seen a huge shift in how we communicate, utilizing a lot of virtual platforms, meetings such as Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Cisco WebEx. So we're currently kind of going through that process and really having to define what the new normal is for us and for our business. Luckily for a lot of our manufacturing locations in Pennsylvania and in the US, manufacturing is deemed an essential business. So we have been able to keep the doors open for a lot of our manufacturing locations. And from the operations realm too, a lot of our machining areas are socially distant apart. So that's not been a huge issue for us, but just making sure that we're maintaining a safe culture and work environment for our employees who are still coming to our office locations, wearing masks as essentially as possible, and how we communicate with each other in person and also virtually has been something that we definitely adjusted to within Komatsu.
Great. Well, this has been a challenging time for leaders, but also it's a time of opportunity. Can you share how you've seen good leadership and how Komatsu continues to develop leaders within your business?
I think one of the main things that I've seen in terms of our leadership team coming together is through communication. We've had several town halls with our CEO for Komatsu Mining, our Komatsu Americas Corporation, which is based in outside of Peoria, Illinois. They've held several town hall discussions with our team to give them updates on the business, also updates in terms of our fiscal year-end merit process, upcoming bonus implications that has had in terms of how our business has done in the last couple of quarters. So I think our leadership team has been very influential in terms of the communication aspects and really, being open and asking, and answering those questions that our employees are asking during those town hall sessions, I think has been, a really key thing to, really include different perspectives in the business and making sure that our employees' voices are being heard. In terms of some of our leadership development programs, I think this has given us a really great opportunity to look internally at some of the training options that we have available and really taking inventory of how effective are they from the virtual landscape. One example, we have a course called Foundations of Leadership, which is a leadership course that is cascaded out for about 4 days to our neutral managers and also mid-level managers within our organization. Our talent development team has been looking at ways to deliver this virtually and also looking at how to add some new content to the course and some new training topics that can really help support the ongoing work culture that we have now in terms of working from home or being socially distant from each other and kind of leading remote employees. So we've seen communication come into play in terms of our leadership teams and also really that effectiveness in terms of our training and utilizing those tools and training sessions that we have to continue that connection to our employees and making sure that we're taking their consideration and their development during this time very seriously.
Great. Well, assuming that most of your operation is essential, like you told us, and employees have continued working, how has professional development and training been encouraged and supported? You've kind of answered that, but anything to add to, how that's kept as a really high priority for you?
Sure. I think some of the resources that we have with individual development plans, we have some templates in place that we have shared with our employees in the past. And I think really equipping our employees and our leadership to encourage them to share those resources with our employees and, having an open door mentality, maybe an open camera mentality now in terms of working from home, but just making sure that we're in tune to the development of our employees and utilizing those resources that we have. We do have some internal training available that's more curated learning content, some short videos from subject matter experts and different business leaders from other corporations that we have access to that are about 3 to 5 minutes in duration and in length. So I think encouraging, our employees to utilize those tools and also, having them go out and, finding some TED Talk videos or some different platforms for free learning online has been really essential to coming into play and how we continue to have those conversations with our employees regarding their development and their engagement during this time.
Great. I just made myself a little note, Alan. I would love to follow up with you on maybe just identifying a few of the best, whether it's TED Talks or just, short resources that we might be able to share with everyone on the call. I know those often can almost make a shift in my day if I've listened to the right thing or heard the right message. So maybe we can even throw up some of those things that we're all really finding quite inspiring and helpful as we navigate through this. I know you and I have shared things between us before, so maybe we can offer some things up. So for those that are furloughed, not working, do you have suggestions for good professional development opportunities? We kind of alluded to that, but I'm curious if it's really valuable for those who aren't working to continue training. Is that going to help them as they prepare to return back to work? Or if, Lord forbid, they've lost their job and they're going to need new work, is it important for them to continue looking for professional development? And what are some good resources?
I definitely believe so. As someone who has recruited and hired employees in the past, I think finding those unique learning opportunities that really make our potential employees thrive and show their drive, their passion, their dedication to that ongoing commitment to learning for their personal career and also their professional career, I think is really crucial. So I think it's important for everyone to look at those avenues for continued growth during this time of working from home or how this has maybe disrupted your own lives. How do you find those positives and those benefits coming out from this and really applying them to what you do on a daily basis? Some of the resources that I've found some articles to support. There's one online learning platform called Coursera that's offering free certificates to 85 different courses. At this point in time, there are some ones that you do need to pay for to kind of access in terms of your line of work or of an interest area that is really critical to you. So I think doing the research online and seeing what avenues to go down is, we mentioned TED Talks are one. One thing that I use a lot is podcasts. I think learning something new, whether it's applicable to your current line of work, future work, or just finding something to escape for 15 minutes to a half hour at a time. I think having those resources available to kind of reset, refresh, and re-navigate your focus and priorities is really crucial. So I think that continuous development mentality is really key during this time. And as someone who may be looking for a future employer, I think that's definitely a question we're going to ask in the next couple months, couple years of how did you deal with your ongoing learning during this time. So I think it's really important for people to take reign of their own development, their own careers, and making sure that's definitely at the forefront.
Great. Do you believe that teams have been strengthened or challenged by the current situation?
I would say a little bit of both. Some of the teams that I work with, I see that communication element is really crucial to that connection, person to person, and also connection to the business. One of the things that my boss has done is set up recurring meetings with each team member that reports to him. So he has about 11, 12 direct reports. So he has bi-weekly meetings with each of us just to make sure that we kind of reset our priorities, talk about some initiatives that we're undertaking, and if there's any additional support that is needed, either from myself or from him, that's at the forefront of our discussions and our focus. So I think some teams have been challenged, kind of adjusting to this new line of work. And one thing that then my boss has challenged each of us this week to kind of look at, we talk about the new normal of working from home and the new normal of, no matter what business we're in, we're definitely faced with that new normal, but really challenging, how do we define that? How do we define that as an employee? How do we define that as an organization? I think that's critical for us to focus on that is, how do we define the new normal that best suits us as an employee, as a person, and as an organization?
It's a great opportunity for us. I think this is a time when, I've said this to several of the people that are on the call. It's kind of that time where we can almost do anything, blame it on COVID, So it's a really good time to imagine what you'd like things to be like when we get through, when we recover. And so why not kind of dream big and then say, what can we either take away from what we're doing right now? Or maybe what can we try that we've been afraid to try in the past, but it's a really good time to just try something new. So that's super. So have you been part of strategizing for the return to work as you bring people back into the office? Can you tell us about what kind of policies and plans are important to this process and how you've been involved?
Sure. I haven't been involved directly. We actually do have a policy team that has been working on multiple HR policies over the course of the last year and a half to 2 years. And in our new fiscal year 20, which just started in April, our policy team is going to look at remote work policies. So it's been kind of forced upon us right now to talk about those things and present them to the HR leadership team. In mid-March, when we started to roll out some different policies based on our different office locations, we did have some plans in place at our Warrendale Cranberry Township office, where we did have a shifting work policy of, with our 100 employees that we have, we would set them aside into different groups based on where they sit in the office, their cubicles, make sure people are socially distant from each other. And we did have that in place for about a week, but you'd have 30 people in the office one day, then the next day 30 different people, and we'd also encourage working from home if possible. So I think that's kind of the framework that we will be looking at in the future of, when we are able to bring people back to work at our multiple locations. I think having something in place is really key to sustaining that structure and that connection to each other and our colleagues in the workplace. So I could definitely see some policies around that and sustaining maybe a balance between working from home and coming into the office a couple of days a week. So there are ongoing discussions with our policy team and HR leadership team to define those things on a daily, weekly basis as things do shift in the market.
Yeah, I see that as something that, maybe that's even a future session or something that the chamber can help with. Is there are a lot of different policies and procedures out there, and some of the listeners might be with really small organizations that need something relatively simple. Others might be more involved, but I think now would be a time, maybe you even have a staff member that's working part-time or remotely and you're not sure how to have them spend time. Maybe they can be researching some of those policies so that you can begin discussing those to see, again, is that something that you just need to work on through the pandemic, or is it something that you might want to actually incorporate into your future? We're definitely, I think, a workforce now that wants a lot of flexibility, and this is kind of forcing us into it, but it might actually be a great takeaway.
Mhm.
And of course, one of those things that we all think we're going to take away from this is more of these, more, more chance to connect online. So I've invited Saxon to join us today. Saxon is a regular attendee of our monthly tech talks, where we love to dig into what are cool technology platforms, what are we using, to do business. And so I thought this was a great opportunity. Alan may chime in here too with some of what they're using, but Saxon, to get started, can you tell us about some of the platforms your teams have been using and what you like?
Sure. So at Child Development Centers, we utilize Microsoft Teams. We actually implemented that prior to all of the COVID situation. We have over 400 employees, so we realized that we needed a system to be able to connect us across all 3 counties from Venango to Erie. So that's something that we purchased and integrates nicely with Outlook email or Office 365 if your organization has that. It's a nice tool because you can do instant messaging, you can do video conferencing just like we're doing now, and then you can also create teams. And for us, it's departments, and we will put each department has their own group. And you can do file sharing, you can do your own private video conferencing. There's just a lot of different tools within Teams that are nice collaboration when you're working on projects together. So that I have the most experience with just because that's my full-time job is utilizing that each and every day. But through all this, I've been using Zoom quite a bit. I hadn't used it prior to the COVID situation, but I've become very familiar with it. It's pretty easy to use. I think for most people, it's not hard to catch on. And because we've been using it so much, it's just a nice tool to use and connect with everybody. But I'm the vice president of our Flex Young Professionals group this year, and we've actually been using Zoom primarily, but we also have an app called Band, B-A-N-D. And that's very similar to Teams where you can create groups and share files or make a poll or a survey, just something that you can reach large groups of people about a specific topic. So for example, we have one for Flex, then we also have a separate one for our Bike and Brew committee that's talking about if we're going to have an event or not, or what can we do as a contingency plan. So that's also a free app to download. There's obviously limitations to that, just like any other software app. There's a price wall or a barrier that you might have to go over to get some added features. But I find that most of these do have free to use services that are actually pretty helpful. And the last one that I've had experience with is Cisco WebEx, which Alan mentioned earlier. I've probably used that one the least of any of these because I've mainly used them during live demonstrations or video calls with sales reps for some softwares that CDC is looking into. I have not played around with it too much to see what the extra features are, but it does operate very similarly to Zoom and to Teams.
So if someone's kind of just getting started, I know we've made our Zoom account here at the Chamber available to any of our members that need to do meetings. We're happy to set them up, and anyone can text Tessa, let her know the time of their meeting, and she'll go ahead and set up that meeting. But if you were telling someone who's just ready to get started, which of these platforms you thought was kind of easiest, most intuitive, what would your recommendation be?
I think Zoom is the way to go. I think you can see that by the number of people that have been utilizing it during the pandemic. It's the user interface, which is the fancy word for the menus and the things that you're interacting with on the screen. I think it's pretty straightforward, easy to learn, and I've found no issues with it to this point. And the best thing of all is like having a resource like the Chamber offering the Zoom account. That's a nice added bonus. I think Teams is great for me just because I have experience with it, but if you're willing to learn and take some time to practice, Teams can be a really helpful tool, but its user interface is a little more in depth. There's some extra bells and whistles, I guess you could say, that you would have to get used to. Like I said, WebEx, I haven't played around with that much, so I don't know that I could give a fair recommendation one way or the other there, but Band, the app, is very easy to use too. I know we just started playing with it as members of Flex, and I think we picked up on it pretty quickly. But as far as video conferencing goes, if you're just looking for a quick, easy solution that most people can understand without too much trouble, I would recommend Zoom.
Yeah, it seems like in the past when I've used WebEx, it's largely been for actual webinars where there's a presenter and a screen and such. Alan, do you have anything to add to that? Is there anything that you're using different, or do you kind of have a preferred platform?
For our organization, we have shifted from recently WebEx to Microsoft Teams. We're still utilizing both, but I think the functionality with Teams is really inclusive. As Saxon said, you can have different teams and different groups for file sharing. You can update live documents and see who made the last change. So I really prefer the Microsoft Teams platform, and we've had some training sessions about how to utilize all the tools that are in there. So it's still an ongoing learning experience for us. But I would say for our organization, we've seen a huge focus on Microsoft Teams. And I think Zoom is a good way to start, definitely with some video conferencing and having to connect with employees at your business. So I don't have anything else that I've used outside of what Saxon suggested, but I definitely think that Microsoft Teams has been really effective for us.
One thing I did not mention is I found a limitation with Teams, at least to this point, is that you can only have 4 people on your screen at once during a video call.
Yeah.
You can pin who you would like to be on the screen. So you would just select them in the participants menu and pin them, but it's only those 4. I think they're working on an update to allow more like we have with Zoom, but Zoom definitely is a little more flexible right now as far as having a lot of people on your screen at once, which I find helpful.
Yeah, I was on my biggest Zoom call yet a few days ago. We hosted an event for educators, and we had 2 sessions, and over the course of the 2 sessions, we had, I think, roughly 110, 115, but about 75 in the morning and the rest in the afternoon. And it's quite interesting to have that many people in a meeting and be able to see people and talk to people. It's really amazing that we have this technology. I'll certainly remind people that for home or for less formal, I call up people on Google Hangout, or I've gotten to where sometimes when I have Facebook up and pull up chat, you can video. If I'm chatting with someone anyways, we decide we want to talk face to face, that's really quite easy. That both of those work really well from your phone. FaceTime for those who have Apple products too. So those are worth exploring if you haven't used them yet. And if obviously you're all on Zoom, so you have a comfort level here, but one of the first things I tell people if they're heading into their first Zoom calls is go ahead and get it set up on your devices, any of these platforms. If you at least go in once and make sure whether you need to register or make sure your device is familiar and plays nice, that helps, I believe. So as we're winding down on our last 8 minutes of the call, I want to remind everyone the chat is open. So if you have a specific question for Saxon or Alan, or you just want to comment and add, you're welcome to. So we'll have a little bit of fun with this, but for real too. We won't embarrass anyone on the call, hopefully. But pet peeves. What we've all sat through a lot of video calls. What are some of the things that you've seen that really are probably use or misuse that you can share and caution us about?
Well, thankfully, in all the calls that I've been on, I haven't had too many people do anything too crazy, but I think there's a couple just common practices that I would try to avoid. Number one is making sure that you're muted if you're not talking, and a lot of that comes down to just making sure that the host is communicating that to everyone up front, because sometimes people aren't familiar with that, and if they're not told, they just don't know, which is fine. But it can be very distracting during a meeting if someone doesn't have their mic muted and they've got a lot of background noise. I mean, I've had people's TVs on in the background, they're listening to music, they're typing while they're listening. So just anything that can be heard over your microphone can be a big distraction and interrupt the meeting. I've also had people eating a full course meal on the screen, which is not necessarily what I want to watch while we're meeting. If you do have to eat, I would recommend just turning your video off for the few minutes that you need to do that. But those are the 2 big ones. I mean, some people, I get it. Like myself, I have a toddler. You have to get up during a meeting and walk away. That's perfectly okay. But if people are doing, I don't know, I haven't seen this yet, but I've seen it on the internet, people doing exercises in the background, just anything that is a distraction to the presenter or the other people on the call, I would try to avoid. But the main one is, I think the most common one that I've seen is just not being cognizant of background noise and distracting the rest of the participants.
Right. Alan, any you'd like to share?
Well, we actually had a call yesterday with a few of our HR leadership team members, and one of our directors of talent management had to turn off her camera for a little bit. She's like, sorry, my cat was walking in front of my picture. I didn't want to have that interrupt. So there are some different things that definitely come up. And as we've used, virtual, WebEx, Microsoft Teams in the past, that's been kind of taboo, if you have a baby crying or you can see your dog in the background. But, I think it's important to keep that in mind too, of, this is still a professional work environment, even though it has shifted to working from home, just to make sure that you're trying to, focus as much as possible. But there are things that will definitely come up. So I think just, be aware of your surroundings and, there are some things you can't stop or mitigate, and that's okay. We're all kind of dealing with this together and going with the flow and trying to see what best works for each of us. But there have been some moments that have added a little humor, I think, into to this situation, which I think it sometimes is a good thing to kind of laugh with the baby in the background or people showing their pets. I think that's okay. But yeah, definitely focus on that professional mentality. I think is really key.
Yeah, I think knowing your audience and your, the setting of your meeting is so important. I've really enjoyed that. I feel like I've gotten to know people better. I like to see their environments, and Charlotte's part of many of our meetings. We love that. So I think you're right. You kind of consider what the setting is. And certainly there's all kinds of great tips on Zoom and on video out there. I know we've shared some of them and be happy to share more. Um, checking your equipment, I think, is important too. Your mic and your lighting and all of those kind of things will certainly help this be easier. And I appreciate you're talking about the video. One of the things we talked briefly about yesterday is I think there's so much of the time that it is better to turn your video off. Particularly if you're, I have meetings where I really want to do a little multitasking. Someone walks in, I need to pick up the phone, or I want to grab a bite to eat. But there's also times when having your video on really helps kind of show your engagement. So I think that's a reminder. If you're just simply uncomfortable with the idea of video, start exploring how you can, get more comfortable with it. Because I think when we're talking about connecting teams, largely that connectedness comes through being able to see each other and smile when something makes you happy, or maybe even, frown when something doesn't sit right. So I would encourage everyone to get more comfortable with the video if your situation that you're in at the moment allows you to do that. So I know it's meant a lot to me working alone in my office to actually be able to see people and kind of get that sense of emotion too. So that said, are there any of these tools that you're going to use more than you did in the past that you really think you're going to take away and incorporate after all the restrictions are lifted?
Well, as I mentioned, we had already had the video conferencing capability at CDC through Teams, but it wasn't something that we utilized necessarily on a regular basis just because everybody could meet in person. But now that we've started to meet every day, multiple times virtually through this situation, I think that's going to change the mindset and the culture, maybe not just at CDC, but at a lot of different organizations, that if you don't have to go somewhere in person, you can do it just as easily and just as well on video conference. And I know working from home was something that we didn't necessarily embrace at CDC prior to this. We didn't know that it was necessary or if it was realistic. How are we going to monitor if people are being productive? And those kinds of questions. But I feel like this whole thing, we've tried to turn this into a positive, and what can we learn from this? How can we get better as an organization? And I think just time management, if we started to meet more virtually, then that would save us drive time. So we have locations all the way up in Erie through Venango County. So there is a little bit of travel time that's involved with us. And I think just the convenience of it. If you have a lot on your plate and you have to go to a meeting, if you don't have to leave to go somewhere, I mean, it's just a nice option to have. Now, as a communicator, I love in-person communication too. So I don't know that it'll totally obliterate that, but I just think it'll cut down on some of the unnecessary instances that we can just handle virtually now. So that's probably the primary thing that we'll take away. We haven't introduced a whole lot of new things. We've been just trying to analyze what we've been doing and seeing where there's holes that we can fill.
Alan, for you, any takeaways that you think you'll incorporate more into your work?
I think definitely the video chat I think has been really beneficial for our organization. Susan, as you said, just seeing someone face to face over the screen has been really really important for us. And we've utilized a lot of the WebEx and tools in the past, but over the last couple of years, people wouldn't turn on their cameras, so people would be doing something else, maybe in the background, kind of multitasking. So I think it does help, focus in on, someone's attention, their engagement, making sure that they're being heard, their perspective is coming into play. So I think that's something that we'll continue to leverage as an organization, is utilizing the video chat function and making sure that we feel like we are a team or a group coming together rather than being shut off, in terms of turning off the video. So I definitely think that, the virtual technology that we have will really help define, that new normal that we need to defined as an organization. So I think it's something that we'll definitely take away with for us in terms of our long-term growth as a culture, and helping to assess where we are and how we continue to stay connected with each other.
And Saxon, you kind of mentioned this, but we'll kind of end with Alan here on this. Do you have any encouraging words for why we really should make an effort to meet in person when this ends? I mean, it may be tempting to say, I can just do everything from home and we can save lots of time by doing all of our meetings virtually. Why should we do some in person when we have that opportunity?
I think it's really just that human connection that we have. I miss seeing people in person, and I think I think it will be crucial to still come together and be able to connect in person. I shared a story with Susan and Saxon yesterday that one of our employees had a birthday last week, so we all went to one of our local parks. There were about 8 or 9 of us, and we had a little social distance birthday party for her. So I think having those connections to people in person, I think is really key and really makes us who we are. I think a lot of my, great development tools in my personal life has come from, my friends, my family, and those connections that I established with colleagues in the office and with a lot of you on the call too. So I think it's important to make sure that we have those human connections as much as possible as we continue to develop the plan to coming back to work and making sure that human connection, person to person, is really key in that.
Thank you. Well, I told Alan that I virtually attended the first wedding this week. So with an upcoming wedding for him in the next month, I know he'll be using some virtual tools. So we congratulate him and look forward to hearing how that goes and know that there will be a in-person reception in the future. So thank you all. I don't see any questions in the chat, but I really thank Saxon and Alan for sharing their experience with us. Again, I'd welcome any suggestions for future topics. On Tuesday, we will be talking about public relations and marketing and why that's important to be thinking about during this time. While it might be tempting to kind of just sit still and wait until things are over, there's probably no more important time to be letting your customers and your teams knowing what you're up to and what you're doing. So join us that day. We'll be sharing some information on that. So I remind you to join us every Tuesday and Thursday for Shift, Sustain, Succeed. And this will be recorded, so you'll be able to visit our website. Oh, let me just change the slide right here. This will be available on our website too, contact information for Alan and Saxon. So if you'd like to follow up with either one of them, you can do so. Visit our website and you can follow up on any of the things we mentioned here. We'll note there as a resource. And thank you. Have a great day. The weekend is coming soon. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.